just a few things I want to say before you get to listen to the podcast in its entirety. And this is actually Tom Donahue Reports, a longer form subject. And the word that came to mind after I finished before doing my edits was scandal. And I'm reporting and focusing on that term, scandals, because there are many scandals that plague Donald Trump. There's many scandals that plague many politicians, and there are certainly many scandals swirling and surrounding many of the cabinet picks as they are going through the confirmation process. And then I link that to the number one news outlet and organization that MAGA and conservatives rely so heavily upon. And I look at that fertile recruiting ground and pipeline to the Trump White House and those that he finds as his allies politically and media-wise. And I had to think back to all the scandals at Fox News. And there are many. And part of the reason I was thinking about that was because of Pete Hetzeg. As you listen to this podcast, you're going to find that I go over that. I talk about Bill O'Reilly, Jesse Walters, Kimberly Guilfoyle, Eric Bolling, and of course Roger Ailes, the founder of Fox News and the chairman before he was ousted. Tucker Carlson, he had his own set of issues, but they were more about statements he made and the hot water it put Fox in with relating to Dominion. So many of these scandals are sexual in nature and payouts and non-disclosures. And so that's why I decided, because of all the scandal swirling in the Senate confirmation of Trump's picks and nominees, that I decided to do this more in-depth podcast. Let's go right to this latest podcast, Tom Donahue Reports, and let me know what you think. Good day and welcome, America and beyond. I'm Tom Donahue for Tom Donahue Reports and The Briefing. And I wanted to cover something that I think really encapsulates the theme as it related to the cabinet picks, the confirmation hearings, the dubious and questionable decisions of Trump and who he chose. And it kind of goes back to the Fox Follies, Fox News. And if you have, in an unbiased way, looked at the track record of the network, and I'm talking about just the politics or the partisanship and the accuracy or sometimes the spin. But remember Mr. No Spin Zone, Bill O'Reilly? And you remember his controversies and his non-disclosure payments to silence women that he harassed? And then you know about Roger Ailes and all his sexual ailments, the network. And he was the brainchild behind Fox News. He started a right-wing conservative news and talk network prior to that. It was the precursor. And he also was the producer of Rush Limbaugh's television show, not radio, but television show. You know, he almost looked like the twin brother of Alfred Hitchcock. And Alfred Hitchcock was also found to be one of those sexual deviants and all hands on deck on the set. And so he also faced controversy in his day. But when I look at this, I'm very troubled by some of and there's still some people on that staff that are in high positions that are primarily in the talk host arena that have a checkered past, that are still, I guess, survivors of the cleaning house several years ago. Bill O'Reilly was one of them. But there have been others that are back in prominent media roles, and it boggles the mind. Well, I was hearkening back to a movie that I saw, and I didn't even see the entire movie, but it was on one of the cable networks. That was before I had Netflix. It was called Bombshell, and it was called Bombshell for two reasons. One, of course, the blondes that were being portrayed were bombshells in real life and in Fox News hosting and news division. And bombshell because it was a bombshell report or reports that came out about all the sexual harassment and the payouts and allegations that brought down the president and the chairman of Fox News, Roger Ailes. Ever notice when you have these controversies and people are let go, fired, disgraced, that they tend to not live much longer after those things, especially if that's their life. You look at football coach Joe Paterno and the controversies that he allowed to percolate and to be perpetuated under his tutelage as head coach at Penn State. He died less than a year of cancer after he was forced to resign. Roger Ailes, same thing, didn't last very long. I think it was under a year. So this movie had some really fine actresses that, in reality, I mean, some of them were actually even better looking, but it was, at least a close approximation in this movie. And three of the stars that were part of this cable movie, which many of you probably are well aware of. So you had Charlize Theron, who played Megyn Kelly. You had Margot Robbie, one of the roles, and you had Nicole Kidman playing Gretchen Carlson, who actually was a Miss America, beauty pageant winner, super bright, incredibly attractive and good personality and good Christian woman. There was a woman that played Kimberly Guilfoyle that, as you probably recently realized, that she was the fiance of Don Jr. and she was kicked to the curb by Don Jr. You can just Google who his new girlfriend is. She's a very rich socialite that happens to be about 20 years younger than Kimberly and incredibly attractive, but a party girl and a social influencer, someone that, from what I read recently, President Donald Trump and others are advising Don Jr. against. But nevertheless, he was seeing her during the time that Kimberly was still the fiance. So you have all these complex relationships, we'll put it that way, that are intertwined, and all the intermingling or commingling that occurs. So anyway, back to Fox News, because Kimberly was part of Fox News. And I don't know if you're fully aware of the reason that she got pushed out of the Five and other roles that she played at Fox News was that, no, it did not have to do with the fact that she was with the mayor of San Francisco at the time, who's now the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. Yes, they were married. They were a power couple. As you can tell, many of these relationships, politics are just, for the most part, just practicalities. Just they're means to an end. It has not as much to do with the fundamental philosophies and ideologies and commitment to those. So Kimberly was well known for using social media, but also using her phone to take pictures of certain body parts. And also she liked getting massages and would also ask, like, what do you think of this? And she would talk about the size of certain things as it relates to people that she was keeping company with. And that was before she and Don Jr. became a couple. So people went to, I guess, HR and were complaining that she's showing these pictures, that they're feeling like uncomfortable, that she wants them to look at this and to feel, to touch or massage. And boom, she was gone. Okay, so, I mean, that's a woman, but realizing that the culture at Fox News is that almost anything goes until you get caught and you start creating embarrassment and bye-bye, see you later. But there were no non-disclosure agreements with that and no payouts as far as I know. So let's talk about Jesse Walters. Now, Jesse, he was a kind of a pit bull, kind of a street reporter that would dig up things and would ask the questions at certain events for Bill O'Reilly. And kind of swarmy, smug, smirking, just smart alecky kind of guy. For whatever reason, Fox gave him a weekend show that it is what it is. I mean, not as popular as the weekday shows, but after O'Reilly left, and then after Tucker Carlson was booted. Now Tucker Carlson didn't have any sexual indiscretions. None of his controversies had to do with that. It was more the fact that he was creating embarrassment because of some of the guests and some of the statements and some of the hypocrisy that was also exposed in what he was saying privately and what he was saying publicly. And they just felt like with the Dominion voting machines companies suit against them, that they felt that it was time for him to go. He was a liability and no longer quite the asset. Well, Jesse Walters, gets this primetime position. Now, did he earn it? Was he qualified? No, it's sort of like Trump cabinet members. They just said, oh, we'll just throw him in there and see how it goes. Because I know Fox News, typically, if you put a body bag in there, or any kind of talking head, because they have a loyal audience, you're going to maintain a certain number anyway. But Bill O'Reilly, to his credit, I don't like the guy, never did. I think he's a bully. I think he's a blowhard and someone that self-admitted, known, a sexual abuser. And so multiple payouts. I mean, close to $30 million in payouts to women that, he sexually harassed. So, but they always come back to life. It's like, Night of the Living Dead, or The Walking Dead. They always pop up somewhere and they become restored. I mean, almost like politicians and actors and actresses when they are able to turn a crisis into some kind of redemption story. So Jesse Walters, he is married to a woman, then starts chasing. As a matter of fact, he's even joked on the air with certain people that his current wife, the second wife, was someone that he kept harassing till she finally would go out with him. And so here's a subordinate, someone that's working in a position that is not on the same level as being a primetime talk show host, but he kept after her and then divorces the one, and then he's with her. Again, another Fox News made for primetime office love affair. Now you have Laura Ingraham. She's been right on about a lot of her politics, a lot of her positions, and I know people in the industry, and I know people that have worked with her and around her and for her. She's a diva, okay? She can wear all the crosses she wants, and she's very questionable relationships. Some of them even liberals and out of their mind liberals. There was talk that so it was Dinesh D'Souza, I think that's the way you pronounce his name, but he's a writer. He's produced movies. I think one was either The 20 Mules or 2,000 Mules at Salem Radio Network. They decided to separate themselves from him because they felt that some of his claims regarding the 2020 election were not fully validated, or could be verified. But yeah, he was a guy that I think was a classmate of Laura Ingraham. I don't have all the details in front of me, but I do know that they were romantically involved. The other guy was he was the flaming liberal that was on ESPN, and then he was on MSNBC, Keith Olbermann. So yeah, you have some really strange bedfellows, if you will. And I don't want to be too literal there. A lot of personalities. We've got divas. We've got foxes running around and we've got wolves in sheep's clothing. And that movie was Bombshell. You could look it up. You could, I mean, they've got some incredible actresses, beautiful actresses, and that there is a lot of truth to be said. How much was fictionalized, I'm not quite sure, but we do know that Megyn Kelly had her reasons for leaving, and she did say that Roger Ailes had her do the spin and was making comments that were sexually inappropriate. She witnessed certain things. Gretchen Carlson went through that with Roger Ailes. So there was, a pattern of these kinds of things. So then we have the Weekend host, Pete Hetzig, and the fact that he's got a real complicated past as it relates to relationships and to people and to alcohol. And so Pete is on his third wife. Now, I mean, there's a lot of folks that are good people that, things just don't work out. And, sometimes it's out of your control and it's not your decision. And that's different. But so anyway, his second wife was pregnant. And this was also another fox from the Fox hen house there that he has an affair with, leaves the first wife because he gets the second wife to be pregnant. Then he's at this conference that many of us are now well aware of because of the cabinet hearings and the Senate investigation, the report. We do know that there was a $50,000 payout, and that $50,000 was for a non-disclosure. But there was a police report. There was the incident that was called in. There was, he claims it was fully consensual, relationship. Well, this woman was married. It was at a conservative conference. She said that all she can recall is that she was at the bar. She was trying to tell him about how handsy he was and how out of control he was, and that she just remembers waking up groggy in a hotel room and staggering out of there. and that she realized that she felt that she had been raped. Okay, but he claims it was a consensual relationship. I'm not here to be the prime investigator. We do know that at minimum he was sexually involved with a woman at a conservative conference, had too much to drink. He pays money so that it doesn't get back to Fox News because he wants to keep his job. So any which way you look at it, it's bad news. Okay, he's a bad news person. I just don't understand this. I mean, you go from one to the other to, well, I guess Commander in Chief Donald Trump maybe give him a little advice with his three wives and all the extramarital affairs, and even with porn stars. It's just bizarre. I just can't wrap my head around this. I mean, I know we all are. We're human. We have certain drives, whether it be sexual, whether it be for business, whether it be just trying to get ahead. Or just to survive, and it's just unbelievable that we have these people that are vying for these political positions of power, and they're morally compromised. In the past, those things would be disqualifying. Now it's almost a badge of honor, and that, hey, it's just a little bit of controversy. But so many of these folks have been supported and have floated through the Fox ecosystem, the Fox universe, and they just get recycled through. It's not a big deal. So you can say what you want and do what you want, and if you cause too much havoc for us, and it becomes too hot to handle, then you're discarded of, and that's what's happened to some of these cast of characters through the Fox universe. Now, again, I'm not trying to excuse away what other networks and other controversies are. It's just that this is the number one cable news network. This is the feeder system into the Trump administration. And people rely heavily, that are conservative, that are MAGA, on Fox News. And you look at these presenters, that's what they are. They're performers and they're presenters. Most of them don't have the chops to do the job. But nevertheless, this network is the highest rated. They do have some good people. They do have some qualified people, so don't get me wrong. But I think everything should be put to the test, and just don't assume or accept, what you hear. Remember good old Ed Henry, news reporter? He also was let go because of his drinking issues and his womanizing and being accused of sexual abuse. Eric Bolling hosted a program later on called The Balance, and he was on, I think, the Sinclair stations, then he went to Newsmax. But the reason he was fired, he did the private part pick, I don't want to say the word, and so he was showing off his manhood to staffers, sending it through email and through texting, and that's why he got fired. And it's like, I mean, if I, and I know Chris Ruddy. I interviewed him many years ago when he was working at a Pittsburgh paper, and he was helping to expose the Clinton Chronicles. So I go a ways back. So Chris Ruddy, who owns Newsmax, the magazine, well, now it's more like a online news site, and then of course the TV streaming network that's on many cable outlets, and also Newsmax 2 TV. I would be thinking, well, okay, what was why were you fired from Fox News? And of course the stories were out there, and it's like, and then you say, oh, that's no big deal. Now, if someone's inclined to do that and has a great job at Fox News, now I didn't find him to be all that talented. I just found like he was just kind of a journeyman, just a cog in the wheel. But anyway, Fox made him into something more than I thought he was. So Eric Bolling likes showing off his wares. So you've got, I mean, this isn't just like one or two isolated cases. This is multiple cases, and who knows how many others are going on. I remember they had a legal analyst. Now, I believe this legal analyst is over at Newsmax now, but he was accused of, when he was a judge, they accused him that he was sexually harassing young men. Judge Andrew Napolitano. And so Fox quietly got him off the Fox stage. But then he's hired by Newsmax. So Newsmax figures, well, we'll just dust it, we'll just kind of clean up the image a little bit. We'll never talk about it on the air. We'll pretend like it never happened. It's it's almost like WWE wrestling where a guy could be a jobber and he's lost a gazillion matches and he's not going anywhere. Then they repackage him, and all of a sudden he becomes, a title holder or contender and then a title holder. But you're supposed to have amnesia and forget everything that you thought you knew about this guy. That's what happens in the cable news business. And of course, whether it's Don Lemon, whether it's Chris Cuomo, the liberals and the progressive, they recirculate too. And so it's not just a Fox phenomenon, but Fox being the largest and the most impactful, especially in the MAGA and the conservative realm. Someone's got to talk about these things, not just the controversy per se, but it's like a poisoned well. And every time you think, when we talk about drain the swamp in DC, and then you have new swamp creatures. Well, Fox, they're still there, many of them. So it's just unbelievable to me that any of these networks, whether it be primetime networks, the broadcast networks, the cable news networks, that they have any shred of integrity or credibility. Because in my eyes, they don't. So I have to try to explain to family members, friends, that I put everything to the test. I look at all the news sources. I also use a certain degree of common sense. But people just typically stay within their comfort zone, their comfortable sources, and that's how they make these evaluations. That this is how they decide what is true. They're too heavily reliant on these presenters and these personalities that may or may not be telling you the truth. And I was one of the few that decided oppose and expose the Fox follies many years ago, but also more recent when this Dominion lawsuit took place and they were able to get the text messages from Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, and other Fox News personalities, and they were contradicting themselves in terms of their private messaging about their concerns about J6 and what Trump should be doing and how they felt about Trump versus what they said on air. In many instances that same day and that same week and weeks to come. But they were petrified of what this could do if they told the truth about what they saw, what they witnessed, how they felt. It could backfire and they could lose a lion's share of the MAGA movement in terms of viewership. So instead, they decided they were not going to talk about their personal feelings. They weren't going to talk about the calls and the text messages, and the alarm bells that were going off around J6. And Tucker Carlson, who's really close with Don Jr. and with J.D. Vance and Trump, was quoted in his own text. And, this is him himself saying that he hated Trump and that Trump was a demon and that he did not believe that the election was stolen and thought Trump was a buffoon. Now, I don't know how Trump Jr., Don Jr., J.D. Vance later, although J.D. Vance had a lot of things to say about Trump. Now, if anyone believes, if you feel so vehement and you feel that this person is so diametrically opposed to what you believe and that you think they're a despicable person and you despise them, there's no way that you come around completely. Now, I know that in business and I know in politics, which is business, you sometimes have to do business with the devil. And that's what we've got going on here. But if Trump really believes that these people have had a complete, pure turnaround and conversion, it's impossible. It just doesn't happen that way. And if you look at so many others that, whether it's Kerry Lake, whether it's Washington Swamy or whatever his name is, they voted for Obama. They were Democrat. It's just wild to me that people could have such. I could see people over time gradually changing, saying that some of these policies mesh better with where they're at now. But these wholesale turnarounds and conversions and flip-flops, to me, they're just not believable. I don't accept them, and that's where I stand. So anyway, some of this was kind of free-flowing. Some of this was kind of pent-up things that I wanted to say. You can take it, you can leave it, you can mull it over, you can process it, and decide, how you want to respond to the information that I share. I know that you're all free thinkers. Those of you that subscribe freely to my podcast and to things that I do, in the broadcast world. And so, being liberty lovers, freedom fighters, truth seekers, free thinking, independent minded individuals, why I feel I can share this information with you. And that's why I want to get this information out through the briefings, through Donahue reports, and other, whether it be now that I'm using X, now that I'm using Substack, I want to continue communicating the truth as I know it, and then you can decide for yourself. So till we meet again, I'm Tom Donahue for Tom Donahue Reports. Have a great night.